Yes, everyone.
Good evening. So we've got a few people still trickling in, but that's absolutely fine. I'll start with my introduction. So some of you have been to our virtual events before. If you haven't, welcome. It's lovely to have you here tonight on this very chilly December evening. But I have to say, I'm enjoying this cold weather because it's a bit more normal, isn't it, for this time of year? So this will be our last virtual event of this year, but we'll have more in the new year. And this is probably for some of us a little bit different, which is what I love. So just to reiterate from what Simon said, we're recording the session. By all means, leave your video faces open because it's nice to see faces, but yes, please mute so we don't get any interference while we're chatting. How it will go is I'm just going to open a conversation up with Rebecca, and then there'll be plenty of time for everyone else to ask questions. But if you're listening to something we're talking about and you think, oh, I want to ask me, just pop it in the chat, and Simon is going to monitor that, and we can ask some of those questions at the end as well. So let's welcome Dr. Rebecca Beattie. Welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, Rebecca. So Rebecca features in our December issue. I'm hoping some people are finally getting their beautiful December issues. We have had a little bit of a problem with the Royal Mail strike, so if you haven't got it, it's definitely on the way. I've heard this week quite a few people have got them now, so that's good. Rebecca Beattie is a Wiccan priestess. She has been practicing witchcraft for 20 years. She has a PhD in creative writing, and her new book, Wheel of the Year, Nurturing Guide to Rediscovering Nature's Cycles and Seasons, came out this autumn. It celebrates the turning seasons and provides tools for us to reconnect with the rhythms of the year, which us as swimmers, we're quite well connected. Rebecca is also a passionate outdoor swimmer, and she splits her time between London and her home on the edge of Dartmoor in Devon, which I'm very jealous about. So welcome, Rebecca.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here because it's like we get to talk about swimming as well.
Two of your favourite things.
Yeah, exactly. What could be, better than that?
So I always ask our guests, just tell us where they are right now. And I know it's not that glamorous.
Yeah.
And when your last swim was, and where that lovely swim was.
So I'm feeling very, when you get that bad swimmer. So I'm in Harrow on the Harrow in northwest London. I'm up here for work for a couple of days, so I'm miles away from anywhere swimmable. And because I had a cold last weekend, I missed my Sunday swim group. So the last time I swam was the week before, and we had the best swim ever. I think it was my favourite swim that I've ever done, because we were swimming in the River Dart on Dartmoor, which is where my lovely group meets every Sunday. We just had torrential rain for days and days, and consequently the river's in spate, and there's only really one safe space to swim there, and there's a couple of my group in the room who thankfully make sure I don't do anything silly when this happens. But I swim with my little dog Scout, and if I'm going in the water, she has to go in the water. She won't kind of wait on the sidelines. And I was thinking, gosh, the river looks quite busy, so I took her in attached to her lead, with her lead attached to my arm, and we kind of tethered and
nice.
swam down the river together in a lovely swoosh. So I think that was my favourite swim for a long time, actually.
That sounds lovely. I mean,
yeah.
I was swimming in the River Dart, as you know.
Yeah.
And I got to meet the lovely Scout when I came back to meet and swim with you. So I can just imagine it. And if you can't, guys, there's a lovely little picture of Scout in the feature in the December. So you're a witch that has a brown dog rather than a black cat.
No black cats in my house.
So I thought we'd start with the magic, as it were. And I thought, because we've got a mix of people here, perhaps you could tell us what exactly is a modern day witch, and how it might differ to what we've seen in popular culture.
That's a really good question. So it probably helps to give you a little bit of my background, because this is how my understanding of how magic works is formed. So we all think of, magic as being this thing that witches do. You do spells and stuff, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. My training is in a number of different fields before I came to writing and witchcraft. I also studied psychology and neurolinguistic programming and all sorts of other things. So my understanding of how magic works is from that rather than from the straight witchcraft. So in my head, magic works by what we're doing is using our unconscious minds. So we're not necessarily using something occult that's from an external source. It's all the powers in you, and what you're doing is tapping into your unconscious to really, I mean, it's very akin to goal setting, and it probably sounds really dull. Smart goals at work that we all do smart goals when we're doing our annual appraisal, don't we? And that's how I understand magic as working, that you're tapping into your own unconscious mind and connecting to the environment around you through a variety of different things. For me, it's nature that powers it. And that's kind of how I see my magical practice. So it's more kind of about, for me, being in nature. That's what does it.
Yeah.
So I'm more than happy going for a walk and sitting on a rock by a river and having a little chat with the universe, and that's probably what I do most often if I'm doing magic.
Yeah, and well, I think we can all relate to that. There's definitely been lots of sort of magical moments, I think, throughout my swimming. So I'm sure many swimmers will have related to that. Could you tell us how you became a witch? How did you come to the craft?
I came to the craft because I grew up on Dartmoor as a child, and I was always desperate to get out of Dartmoor because I thought it was terribly dull and there wasn't much going on, and I was sure that all the excitement in life was somewhere else. So I went off and became an actress, which is what I was intent on doing. Spent several years doing that, as working as a professional actress. But sometimes when you've wanted something for years and years and years, and then you get there and you're kind of like, oh, I'm not sure if this is what I thought it was going to be, and found it wasn't a very nice working environment to be in. It wasn't very nurturing or very fulfilling, and I was always reliant on somebody telling me now is the time to be creative, and I was getting quite frustrated. My last acting job was doing a tour of the home counties doing Macbeth, and in the last 5 years of my acting life, I was living in London, feeling really disconnected from nature, not quite understanding how everything fitted together. And then doing this Macbeth tour, which is obviously full of witches and magic and all sorts of supernatural themes. But the thing that really got me was the tour. We were staying in farmhouses in the home counties, out in the middle of the countryside. So I'd come home from doing two performances of Macbeth in the day, and go walking in the woods and by lakes, and I suddenly remembered that's what I'd been missing all along. Was in London, I was living in a very urban place, and concrete and quite violent at times, and not very nice. But the minute I got into nature, I was kind of like, that's it. That's what I was missing. So the irony for me was always, you go out seeking in the world something that you think is outside of yourself, and inevitably what you find is it's what you left at home. So
what was always there.
Yeah, exactly. So fast forward to 2 years ago, to the beginning of the COVID pandemic, and I suddenly had this thought that I was sitting in my tiny little rented flat in Zone 5, and I'd always said if I couldn't live in London, I would go home to Dartmoor. And I suddenly realised in COVID lockdown #1 that I was living 3 hours walk from the centre of London, and there was nowhere to swim, and I couldn't go anywhere, and it was just, oh my gosh, what am I doing here? So made the move at that point to go home, and it was probably, I think, the best thing I've done for a very long time.
Oh, I love it when things like that happen.
Yeah,
I did back home for sure.
exactly.
And you're a high priestess. So for those who aren't familiar with witchcraft, what is that role? What does that mean?
So that role is it basically means that I run a coven with a high priest, and I actually job share the high priestess role with a very, very close friend of mine. So there are 3 of us kind of running a group that meets in Hertfordshire. So ironically, my group is miles away from Dartmoor, but it's sort of still connected to the time I've spent in London. It means that we as a group meet on average once a month or once every 6 weeks to celebrate the Wheel of the Year festivals. It sounds more exotic than it actually is, I think, in a lot of ways. It sounds like a strange thing, but what we're doing is celebrating the cycles of nature through the year together as a group. So we will get together, one of us will write a ritual and we'll do that, perform that together and have a feast. And, it's very gentle and supportive, I think is a really good way to describe it. So a coven is really a group of friends that are getting together to celebrate the cycles of nature.
Yeah. And what was it that perhaps attracted you to paganism and I guess that cycle? Obviously we can relate to the nature side of things, but was it a certain sort of approach to life, a sort of an attitude?
A bit of everything, I think. I as a child, I grew up in an Anglican community. I was, the village that I grew up in was very tiny, and we had a very teeny tiny church that my family were involved in. But I always felt that there was something missing for me there. I quite enjoyed things like the Harvest Festival, and we do Christmas nativities, and I was always slightly rebellious and slightly naughty. So that we would do things like, I think I was a wise man one year, but had my stripy tights on underneath the costume. But I always felt there was something missing there, because it for me was very masculine in terms of the divine. There was no sense of the divine feminine in that. So I felt like I was a bit alienated. And I guess for me, the pagan path brings in that love of nature, and it brings in that recognition that there is a divine presence. So we're not saying that there isn't one. It's quite the opposite. But you get a chance to be able to express it in a way that includes that divine feminine as well. So divine feminine, divine masculine, and divine non-binary in between as well. It's not necessarily gendered in the same way. And it's encouraged that you spend time in nature as much as possible. So
that's nice, because that leads me to my next question, which is how this all relates to your relationship with the water.
The water, I found, I probably came to swimming in my last few years in. So we've got somebody in the room called Judy, who I'm going to give a big love to, because Judy was my first ever boss when I lived in Dartmoor as a young teenager. I was working in a hotel, and Judy was my boss in that hotel, and she swam in the river in the East Dart every day of the year. And I have to say, at that time in the sort of 80s, people weren't really wild swimming. They weren't really swimming in the rivers. So I learned to swim in the village in the river. There was a pool in the river that I learned to swim in, but we didn't really. I don't know if it's a Dartmoor thing, or, you know, I know we're a bit suspicious on Dartmoor of still water generally, but so I saw Judy swimming and thought, oh, it must be really cold, and didn't think much of it. And then later in life, when I was working in the centre of London, it was a gradual, I would say a gradual move into swimming outdoors, because I started in London swimming in a place in the centre of London. When I was working in Holborn, there was an outdoor swimming pool, and I started there, going for a swim at lunchtimes, realizing that the water was really soothing, and you got that sense of nurturing, you know, that being held in the water. But this was my first experience of swimming outdoors since my childhood. So and I'd be lying in the swimming pool at the Oasis swimming baths, looking at planes going overhead and birds flying past, and looking at the moon coming up if I was there at night. And it was magical, because we had that sense of, you know, if it was cold weather, you'd have the mist coming off the water, and it was amazing.
It's a great pool, actually.
It's fabulous. It's
You wouldn't
fabulous.
even know it was there.
Yeah, exactly. And then my job moved, so my head office moved away from there, and the first thing I thought was, oh my God, what am I going to do? I can't swim anymore. So then sort of progressed onto going home via a very circuitous route at the Ladies' Pond on Hampstead Heath. And that was just amazing, because it was herons flying over. There was a heron that nested at the Ladies' Pond. There was a day that I was swimming, and I saw a kingfisher sitting on a branch just bobbing for ages and ages. And, you know, on Dartmoor, you never get that close to the wildlife, but at the Ladies' Pond, you know, it was right there. And I was turned around to apologise for splashing somebody one day, and realised it was a duck, and was just and for me that was just like, oh, this is heaven. It's, you know, the idea of that. And then obviously COVID happened, lockdown, nowhere to swim where I lived, and you couldn't get on public transport. So I think the first lockdown, the bit that hit me the hardest was taking away the relationship with water, because it was I couldn't, yeah, it was inconceivable that you can't swim. Yeah. And I lived in a flat that didn't even have a bathtub. So I was just, you know, just bereft for first lockdown. And then soon after got the call and decided it was time to go home to Dartmoor. And then was, yeah, seventh heaven as far as I'm concerned, because there's so many places to swim there. Yeah. But it's I think it's that being so close to nature, you can see, and I say this to people and they think I'm quite strange, but I'll say it anyway. You're so close to nature. I could see one day, was swimming alongside a duck, and I could see right through that ducks have nostrils that you can see the daylight through, and it's sort of like you're so close to them that you can see all these tiny little details that most people don't really get to see. Yeah, there is that eye level. I like when you're swimming along a river and you can see the roots of, yes, obviously the trees, but then other plants and things, and it's like you can see all the guts of the earth, as it were. And you obviously don't get that, and you know, you can, hikers and runners can see everything we can see that's beautiful, and the view, but there's just some of that, you know, you can see that spring's coming even in December, can't you? Exactly. Yeah, there's all these little tiny signs that you see. And And I love the fact that the pool that I took you to is my, one of my favorite spots.
Yeah, Witch's Spa.
Witch's Spa, yes, Witch's Spa. But to get out of Witch's Spa, you have to pull yourself out using one of the roots of one of the trees.
Oh yes, that's right.
And there've been occasions there where I saw one year dragonflies emerging that were attached to that tree root, which to me was just really magical.
Yeah. So let's talk about the book. So tell us a bit more about it in your own words, and also maybe cover why some of our swimming readers might like it too.
So the book, and it's called The Wheel of the Year, Your Nurturing Guide to Discovering Nature's Seasons and Cycles. And I was so intensely lucky to have the opportunity to write this one. So Wheel of the Year is a pagan system of celebrating 8 seasonal cycles, festivals that go through the year. So we meet every 6 weeks, we pause, we look at what's going on in nature and think about how that's reflective of what's going on in our own lives. And I've been teaching the Wheel of the Year. I've been practicing it for over 20 years now. Had been teaching it for about 7, and really felt once I'd finished my PhD, I'd finished writing a novel about the nature mystic Mary Webb, who is a fabulous writer. If everyone could go and start reading her, it would be great. But I came out of this sort of very long 10-year process of MA and PhD and writing on top of the day job and doing this stuff, and felt like I needed a bit of light relief at the end of that. Wanted to write a book on the Wheel of the Year, but the pagan publisher that I used to work with a lot, who I still have ties to, already had a book on the Wheel of the Year, so I shelved it and sort of thought, well, I'll just add it to my things I'd like to do this year. And then went back to my teaching practice, and in amongst one of my students that were attending the Wheel of the Year classes, one popped up who said, I've got this friend who's a commissioning editor. She really wants a book on Wheel of the Year, and I thought of you. Are you interested? So it was very serendipitous. It was that kind of merging of, okay. And so I've been so lucky with the team at Elliott and Thompson, who are the publishers. It's not a pagan book, so I kind of put this out there because some of the people that I know have read it have come to it thinking, oh, it's a book about witchcraft. I'm not sure if I like that. But what I'm actually doing is opening it up a little, and really it's about encouraging all of us to return to nature, which I think, as wild swimmers, that's what we all do, isn't it? We all spend as much time in nature as possible. So with each chapter, what I've done is taken the theme of the Sabbat, as we call it, the festival, and explained where it comes from and what the roots are and what the themes are, because each one of them has a theme. And then it's got some activities and suggestions for journaling, and a little bit of ritual if you fancy dipping your toe in that water. There might be the odd spell or two tucked away in there if you want to have a go at that. But it's really about the observation of nature. It's about getting back into the close watching of the seasons, I think.
And also, having read it, there's so much sort of a bit of historical context for some of the sort of things that we do. I mean, Halloween is a really great example where, I think a lot of people think it's just this big commercial thing that came over from America, but you remind us of the roots of it, which is very much in the British Isles. And, how we sort of started it all, really.
Yes.
So I found that really fascinating, actually. And, around each of, the cycles, autumn equinox and harvest, and it just, it either made me think of things I've learned, at school, or things I just do because I like to do them. you know, full moon swims and always swim on solstice morning. And so much, I think, as swimmers, we're already sort of aligned a little bit to that wheel.
Definitely. I think, you know, I mean, as I said, it's a process that comes out of my pagan practice and how I connect to the earth and kind of really get that sense of spiritual sort of connection from it. But I think you could, I mean, I've got friends who've read it who are Christian. I've got, you know, from different religions entirely, and it's not really written from the perspective of one religious background. It's just having a look at the fact that also with a lot of our festivals, that there are a lot of archetypal themes that run through all the religions. So at midwinter, we're all celebrating the rebirth of the sun, you know, whether that's the S-U-N sun or the S-O-N sun.
Yeah.
It's that kind of archetypal need that we all have to find hope at the darkest point of the year. And, you know, and then we can go and throw ourselves in the river as well.
Well, actually, that really nicely fits into what I was going to ask next. So we are coming up for our midwinter. So I'm curious how you know, might normally celebrate it yourself personally. And then perhaps you could follow that with how, you know, swimmers here could do it this year, maybe a bit different to what they've done before.
Absolutely. So I know lots of people meet on the solstice, and my own swimming group and I, you know, a few of us have sort of said, oh yeah, let's do a solstice swim as well. I celebrate the festivals in a number of different ways. So I'd have, depending on who I'm with, if I'm with my coven, what we do is we have a ritual that we perform, which is largely around the theme of darkness and then the spark of new life that comes into it. So there's a moment in which often in a circle what we'll do is extinguish all the lights. And there's not many times that you sit in darkness in modern life. You know, if you live in the sort of rural countryside where there are no street lights and stuff, you have access to that level of darkness. But most of us have electric lights, or we have something there that's sort of splitting the darkness. So there's this really poignant moment as a group where we sit in silence and just soak up that kind of moment of utter pitch black darkness, and then the striking of a match and the lighting of a candle that really kind of you know, makes us really feel it. If I'm with if I'm on my own, my personal way will always be to either go to somewhere where you can watch the sun rising, because for millennia, humans have been celebrating that rising of the sun on the winter solstice morning, whether you were in ancient Egypt or ancient Celtic Ireland. There are sites that are built that align to that rising of the sun. So we know that it's a really significant moment, and it always has been. So there's something about, I think, going out somewhere in nature and just watching that sunrise. And obviously in winter, we don't have to get up at the crack of dawn to do it, because the sunrise is coming later and later. I think where I am, it's usually at about 8:15ish in the morning at that point. So that's one way. I might also, I would always go for a swim if there's one on offer, because there's also something about that you know, washing off. I always think with swimming, there's a level to which we're energetically washing off stuff as well. You know, if you've had a tough week at work, the best thing you can do is just go and swim in a body of water. So I think there's always going to be an element of that. And probably I might have a quiet moment with a journal and be sort of thinking about what's been happening this year, and taking stock a bit, and thinking about what's coming in the coming weeks as well.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds lovely. And so I will be solstice swimming. Just as you were talking, I was like, oh, where shall I go?
Yeah.
So what's a good sort of simple thing that I, as a swimmer by the water, I could do on that morning?
I would be thinking about, I mean, if you can get out to your swim spot for the sunrise and have that moment of the sunrise hitting the water, because there's that moment, isn't there, when I was watching the sunrise this morning on the train to London, and sort of just seeing that moment of as it cuts across the landscape, and you get that beautiful, if you're by water, you get that beautiful sunlight on water and the rippling effect that happens on the tree trunks. Yeah, exactly. So I would be really just taking a few moments to appreciate that as it hits the water, and seeing how that movement of sunlight and water is. It's magic. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that sounds great. Okay, so let's move on to some questions. Are you there?
We haven't got any
oh, none's come in yet.
Any come in yet, so please, yeah, if you want to ask a question, type something in the comments box. I mean, we're a relatively small group, so we might just if you want to raise your hand and just ask it verbally, if you depending how you feel, we can do that as well. I think we're small enough to manage that. I've got a question, if no one else has.
Yeah,
it's just, what would be your top tips to swimmers to help us enhance our experience of nature while we're swimming, so that we notice more?
I think for me that there's something very much about the slowing down of the thought process, isn't there? Often I find, for me, I always think when I swim, I'm not actually a very good swimmer. I'm not very proficient. I tend to snail along quite slowly, and I'm sort of taking in what I'm seeing all around me. And I know we kind of divide up into different swimming types, don't we? Some of us sort of get in and front crawl our way around everywhere, and some of us are just sort of breaststroking our way around and looking at what's going on around us. I think what we often lack is the ability to take moments where you switch off your shopping lists brain, the part of you that's thinking about all the things you've got to do that day, and I've got to email this person, and just for a moment just be completely present with the water, and not, just if you sort of say to yourself as you're getting in, I'm just going to park those thoughts and I'll pick them up again on the way out, and just be present and looking at what can you see, what can you hear, what can you feel around you. So if I'm stuck in my head, there's a really nice mindfulness exercise I like to do where you run through the senses to make sure that you're present. So what am I seeing? What am I hearing? What does the water taste like if you've taken it, got that close to it? What can I touch? What can I see? It's just running through the senses and just for a moment connecting to what you're sensing around you, I think.
Okay. So I've got one question. I see Eleanor's raised her hand. We'll get to you in a second. I've got one question's come in on the chat as well. So we'll do those in that order, if that's okay. So Mel from Malvern has said, is there a certain crystal you like to wear in the water when you're swimming?
I wear all sorts of crystals in the water because I'm a bad witch and I don't take them off when I should probably take them off. But there's a few that I quite like wearing aquamarine, because that's a really watery colour, and it reminds me of swimming in in really warm sea waters. You get that sort of remembrance of Mediterranean places. I know that there are people will tell you not to take selenite in the water because it's a sand-based stone. But I've left a piece of selenite in the water for quite some time and it didn't melt. So I also think that the stones that we associate with the moon are great for water, because they're all part of that, part of that watery, unconscious sort of bathing in this lovely lovely element. So I often find the pearls and the selenites, you know, those kind of white crystals are lovely as well.
Thank you.
Eleanor?
Hello, hi Rebecca.
Hello.
I was wondering what star sign you are. I'm Cancerian, and being in the water is my place. It's when and I enjoy swimming with other people, and it's always a really nice energy, but I love to swim on my own, and I'm on the west coast of Scotland, so we're swimming in the sea.
Lovely.
And Karen is also in this group, is one of our group. But sometimes that can obviously be a wee bit dangerous, but it's one of the things I love about it, and I'm prepared to take the risk, is just to swim on my own and listen as I move through the water. Yeah. And I liked what you said about using all the senses, but for me particularly, I love that noise of just hearing me moving the water. Yeah. And it's very mindful. But anyway, what star sign are you?
The other thing I was going to say also is when your ears are below the surface of the water and you've got that feeling, that hearing of the water underneath is amazing. Star sign wise, it's slightly odd. I'm an Aries.
Oh,
so technically I should be all fire and no water, but yeah, no, I'm not.
I'm
really.
the same.
Yeah.
I'm Aries, but I just can't be without the water.
Can't stay out of it. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, we've got another question come in on the chat from Keely. Is there a particular time of the year when you find your connection to nature and your spiritual path stronger in the water?
I think I'm going to answer this because Keely and I know each other, and I think we're probably going to agree on this one. I love swimming at all times of the year. I'd swim every day of the year if I could. The bit that I really noticed that I miss though is in the summer, I miss that tingle. So actually, I know it's slightly strange, but I think I feel the connection particularly strongly in winter when it's really cold and you really know you've been in cold water. You know, I think someone describes it as a million tiny daggers, don't they? It's that feeling of the sort of real tingle. And I think you get the rush of good hormones after that more effectively than you do if it's sort of warm water. But I'll swim in any kind of water, but yes, winter particularly.
I agree with that one.
Yeah,
completely.
You might.
Plus it's quieter, so you can actually have more quiet time.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. What was the temperature this morning, was it, that you were in?
3.8, our first breaking the ice dip today.
Wow, where is that?
That was in rural Bedfordshire.
Oh, lovely.
I've got another question coming on the chat. This is from Karen. Multiple First Nation traditions here in North America reference women, particularly as keepers stewards of water with a special affinity to the aquatic. Is there something similar in the Wiccan tradition?
That's a really interesting question. I think what's popping into my head, particularly at this point, is Wiccans don't necessarily have an overt creation myth in the same way that other religions do. Sometimes, you know, our stories vary, but one of the things that really gives us an affinity to the water is our connection to the moon. Is often, so we see the moon as being the ruler of everything water-based, and the moon is a distinctly feminine, divine feminine body in Wicca. So it's, for me, that would be the connection. The connection would be we have in tarot, we have things like the High Priestess card as well, and the moon card, that all kind of connect back to water in some way, that have that. So it is definitely if elements have a gender, water is a feminine gendered thing traditionally anyway.
Okay, there's another question here from Jan, she's missed a bit of the talk because of her Zoom dropped out. But this question hasn't been asked, so
no, it hasn't.
I think it's a good one. It's It's is there any reason, and I'm interested in this as well, why when you do a solstice swim, you tend to do it at dawn rather than sunset?
So this is and this is I could be wrong, so feel free to correct me, anyone, if you know differently, but traditionally throughout human history, the solstice has been celebrated at sunrise. So if you go to like Maze How, or you go to there are various sacred sites around the world where they're aligned to the rising of the sun on winter solstice. So if you go to Abu Simbel in Egypt, in Upper Egypt, there's a temple there where there's a tiny doorway that's aligned to the rising of the sun. And as the sun comes up, it goes down the corridor and hits the Holy of Holies at the center of this temple. There's a very similar site in Ireland that we've got, and my brain has just gone and forgotten the name, and it will come back to me in a minute. But we in Ireland, we have a very similar site that's aligned. There's a passageway that's aligned to the rising of the sun on the winter solstice. For our ancient Newgrange, yes, absolutely, thank you. For our ancient ancestors, it was the moment of what they were celebrating was that we've been going through since the midsummer point, with our days getting shorter and shorter by, allegedly, according to my my sister-in-law's father, it was 6 minutes a day that you lose of daylight every day. So we've kind of gone through this period of being in the height of summer, and then our days get shorter and our nights get longer and longer. And there's a theory that for our ancient ancestors who didn't really know what was going on necessarily, that there would be this moment of fear that the sun might disappear entirely. So that moment of sunrise on that solstice morning is about that recognition that the sun's come back. And we're going to start getting back into the days getting longer again, which is, I think, a lovely way of seeing it, that we have this cycle of, you have that sense of the growing darkness, but also the growing light that comes after it. And thank you, Carol, for the
fascinating. So we've run out of questions on the chat. Does anyone want to chip in with something, an observation, a question,
or anyone who sort of logged on and was perhaps a skeptic who wants to ask anything? Oh no, we're all
must have it.
Well, I know you said I'll ask another question then. You said that your favorite time for swimming is the winter, and if you take out swimming and just look at everything, what's your favorite time of the year in nature, if you excepting the swimming in the winter?
Except swimming, I think I love the colors in autumn. I think there's something really deeply beautiful about the color changes that we get in autumn, and the sort of slightly cold snaps when they do come. However, part of me always feels a bit sad that we're then getting closer to winter again and it's going to get cold. And for me, my favorite part of the year is spring, because it's that moment of everything waking up again and the birds coming back and being more happening in nature. So you can see all the different non-human animals sort of waking up and starting to pair off and build nests, and there's all that activity and the spring flowers, and it's the waiting for the leaves to come back, I always think, is one of the really special moments, which obviously comes quite late in, sometimes it doesn't come till May in some parts, but it's that lovely return of everything good that we know is going to come back in.
Yeah, I think if you're a spring baby as well.
Yeah, I think we had that conversation, didn't we, when we were swimming?
Because I meet a lot of people who love Christmas and they were born in December, or they love autumn and they were autumn babies. I thought maybe you could also talk about, for those who don't know, how, if someone thought, do you know what, I'm really into this, you know, apart from buying and reading your book, is there anywhere else where people can go to learn a little bit more?
There is, I mean, like I said, I do teach classes online, and there are various places. So there are all sorts of groups that gravitate on social media. I think there are bits and pieces that you can pick up there. But if someone wanted to learn more about the sort of paganism side, I've got a blog where I've got various bits and pieces published to sort of give people a head start on where to look. There's lots of really amazing books out there on sort of you know, various aspects of the practice, and I think often one of the magical things about this stuff is finding like-minded people that you can do it with. So I would also say, also look out for those kind of cultural centres that we've got, whether it's pagan bookshops or, you know, swimming groups are a great place to sort of really connect to like-minded people that are also, you know, practicing some kind of connection with nature, even if you're not necessarily seeing it as an organised spiritual thing in that way. But yes, there's lots of online sources for bits of information, and I've got a website as well that's there.
Yeah. I think when we're all gathered, particularly in our robes at the water's edge, we're probably all look a bit witchy.
Exactly. Well, there is that element, isn't there, that often we are sort of slightly older women, aren't we, that are not necessarily well, I suppose, yeah, it's that sort of I went to a talk recently which was given by Sharon Blackie, who is another you know, she's a fabulous writer that writes a lot about folklore and our need for storytelling and some of those things. And yeah, so she was talking about that sort of the cohort of older women and how we gather and what we do together. And I think swimming groups are a fabulous thing.
Yeah. There has actually another question I saw.
Yeah, Eleanor has popped another question to the chat.
Oh, have we done any rituals in the water?
Yes.
That's a really good question. So most witches' covens meet indoors. We have had some outdoor rituals, but we often work with water indoors as well. So we'll often have a vessel of water as part of a ritual in our we have an altar space in the circle where you have the four elements present. So we've got the earth, air, fire and water, and one of our we have the cardinal points of the compass as well in the circle when we work in our circle, and one of those cardinal points relates to water being in the west and it being the element of feelings and you know, emotional depths and all sorts of things. So we do have particularly for things like Imbolc, we often bring a vessel of water in as well for helping with scrying and all sorts of other things that you can do. So there's lots of ways that you can work with water. Also, there's a tradition of ritually having a salt bath before performing any magic, because it's salt and water together are very special. And it's a way of energetically cleansing yourself of everything. So I was thinking about Eleanor and swimming off the west coast of Scotland. You're already swimming in a sacred body of water that's got that saltwater element. I mean, I think any natural body of water is a sacred thing, but the sea particularly, you've already got that there.
I am actually also a witch. I'm born to a coven. And we were down in the south coast once and thought it would be good to have a ritual on a boat.
Yes.
Somebody had a fishing boat that we were able to use. And it was a nightmare with trying to do the points, you know, the
without falling
the
in.
boat kept spinning round. So what was north was then south, and but it was really, really special. I do quite a lot of spells using water. You'll know yourself that it's very active and there's a lot of energy.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So there's another question popped up, and I think another good one from Elizabeth.
From Liz,
can you see that, Rebecca, or do you want me to read that?
Yes, no, I can see that.
Yes, we have that, yeah.
Have you experienced negativity based on preconceived ideas of witchcraft, black magic, sacrifice, etc.? Yes, all the time. So I think one of the things that's kind of that I'm hoping this book will help with is, I think witches are still seen as being slightly weird, slightly odd. We're still seen as being people that either have weird, sinister rituals that we do where we sacrifice, horrible things. And we don't do any of that. That's the sad thing, is we're really just nature-loving, fairly peaceful, normal, as normal as anyone could be normal. As normal as anybody else, put it that way. So we do have, I still am aware that there are times when I won't
that looks great,
reveal to people that I'm a practicing witch. There are times when I won't necessarily tell people.
Can we just make sure everyone's muted? Yeah.
So yes, we do still get quite a lot of preconceived ideas that people think about things that we do. And I know there are people that I practice with who, in their workplace, for example, can't talk about the fact that they are practicing witches, because it will be seen as, they'll be ridiculed or thought as, not trustworthy. So there are still some elements of prejudice out there. And I guess when I was writing this book, one of my friends popped up recently and she said, I loved the book, it was fabulous. She said, didn't really want to read it because I don't really know about witchcraft and I thought it might be a bit scary, but it's not. So I think that's one of the things I was hoping to get across, is that it is really a gentle, nature-loving path. You don't have to sacrifice cats and do, bats' wings and all the rest of it. That all belongs in Shakespeare, really.
I was curious, do you have a favourite fictional witch character in all the things?
Lots. Lots and lots. I think as a child growing up, I used to love the Worst Witch.
Oh yes,
because I could really relate to that. It was kind of, the slightly clumsy, always making a bit of a mess of things witch. That was one of my favourites. I think our fictional witches are fabulous. Somebody's just popped in and said Nanny Og. Absolutely. Yes, I love the Terry Pratchett witches. They are fab. There's so many, aren't there? There's so many different ones to choose from. It's like, which is your favourite witch? Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Rebecca. I think that's all the questions. It's been such a pleasure. And
I hadn't, publishing a magazine, I had no idea we'd end up on a Zoom call talking about witchcraft. So you never know where anything is going to take you.
You never know where it's going to lead you. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's been, for me, quite fascinating. So thank you.
Good.
Thank you very much, firstly, for doing the initial interview with Ella, and then agreeing to come on the call and talk to our readers and subscribers. That's really great. Thank you very much.
Oh, we had a great time, didn't we, Ella?
We did. It was a lovely. I'm coming back for sure.
Yeah, good.
Thank you so much for your time, and thank you everyone for coming. And we'll see you in the new year. And happy solstice, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, so much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Oh, there's lots of lovely thank yous in the chat. Thanks, Rebecca. Take care.
Nice to see you again.